Hey viewers, welcome back to another episode of Ray of All Trades. I'm working on a Husqvarna 141. This one's been sitting in my to-do pile for a while. It really wasn't worth repairing until Amazon came up with this Prime Day thing, and I found an entire rebuild kit, so they say, for this 141 saw, where I got it for 26 bucks, I think. Whole motor and everything. Basically, I think it was half price. I'm just going to give this thing a try. I mean, these saws used go for 100 bucks, you know, something like that. Had a decent chain on it, decent bar. The kit, when I looked at it, came, and I haven't even really unpacked it yet, but the kit came with plug, new crank seals, new wrist pin bearing, it looks like, I assume. It's got a new piston, ring, wrist pin, new keepers, air filter, carburetor, just a lot of new stuff for 26 bucks, I think it was. Now that's not the normal price. I think it's normally like 40 something, whatever. But still, I said, what the heck? I mean, if I can get a working Husqvarna saw, it's not the pro model, but if I can get a working Husqvarna saw for, you know, less than 50 bucks with all new parts, I was going to give it a try. I mean, it might last a quarter wood. It might last, you know, 10 years. I don't know. My doubts are high, but what do I got to lose? Let's get this thing broken down. Probably going to need to get it cleaned up, I would assume. We'll swap out the motor and seals and everything and throw it back together. Clutch doesn't look too bad. I'd have to put a micrometer on it to see exactly how bad it is, but I mean, it doesn't look too bad. I kind of think it actually might even have a new coil on it. Oh, there's another screw down in there. Might need that. So the part that went flying is that vibration dampener that goes in there and there. Take off the coil. It's always good to have loaner saws, ones that you don't care as much about, because you just never know when somebody's going to need one and you're just not sure of their abilities. I might have to put the plug back in to get this loose, but let's see what happens. There we go. Flywheel washer and a nut. Looks like I am going to have to pull out the fuel tank on this one because the screws come from the bolts come from the bottom up. So let's get the gas dumped out. Since I don't have to split the case, I don't believe that I'm going to have to do anything with the oil. Oof. That really smells bad. All right, so my fuel line right here that I'm going to be changing, I'm going to go ahead and cut it because I'm not going to need it. Just cut it right there in the middle. And I have one more screw right here at the chain catch. There we go. Now the fuel tank's out the way. Pull this, the throttle out the way. They tend to come loose and you lose that piece of plastic there and it's a pain to get back. So, and then we're going to pull this choke out the way, which is just lift up and then it just pops out of this, out of the carburetor. It's just a fork, you know, spring loaded. So just push it out. The carburetor is attached to the body of the saw with these two screws right here. Let's get those two loose. Everything else was a T25 on this thing. I don't think it was a T27. It felt more like a T25. And that happened to be what I had in the drill at the time, so that's what I used. So, but these two are number 2 Phillips head. I'm going to pull off the 2 number 10s. Keep all this carburetor stuff beside each other. That bracket that was bolted to the body is held on with a couple of number 8. Nope, they're smaller than that. 7mm. Seven feels a little bit loose. These might be quarters. All the carburetor stuff together. And I'll put that plate with it as well. That are holding this manifold block on. And then that's what holds my intake on. The intake is around this part, that's this black part. Then that green part is my impulse line and it goes right on this one. Just move the piston so it's down at the bottom. Fill it up with string. Since I'm just, taking this thing apart anyway, realistically I could put a screwdriver into the exhaust port and just basically hold it if you didn't care about the cylinder. But if you do that, just know that it's going to destroy stuff. Let's go stuff a little bit up inside there until it, when you turn it, it binds up like that. Now let's see if we can hit it to make it come off of there. If not, I'm gonna have to come up with a spanner wrench to do it. Okay, finally came loose. Pull out the clutch drum. There's a washer behind it, and then of course the clutch. There's a washer right here covering up the oil pump. Put it back on the oil pump as soon as I get it apart. No, it's wedged behind this piece of metal. All right, so there's these two tabs. We'll have to pry out just a little bit to get them to come loose. So this is held on with this tab right here. Basically just pushes against it. And then the oil pump, oh, I see why. The oil pump has this channel on it. Right there. Now let's pull off the oil pump. Keep all that together. All right, we're down to the motor itself. Let's take out these. And then the motor comes out. Bottom cap. Couple of oil seals. Scored up piston. And scored up piston and the stuck ring on it. Well, I guess it freed up when it was came out, but it was scored up right here. And scored up right up here. I'm just gonna assume that this thing possibly scored up either because carbon came loose and got destroyed, or the seal started leaking or something like that. Let me clean up these parts. Let's try to see if this stuff actually fits. All right, cleaned up all the parts with the old gasoline. Sometimes I use a power washer, a small electric power washer, really low pressure. If I have a bunch of old gasoline sitting around, I'll use that. So what do I get with the new stuff and what do I have to throw away? So I got a new intake boot. I do not get a new impulse boot, but I think I actually have one of these. We're going to steal this just in case. So it just pulls right out. The rest of this goes in the box. With some new gaskets. New ring, new piston, new wrist pin, new keepers, and a new wrist pin bearing. So let's put all this to the side for just a second. Let's get the old stuff disassembled and find out what I need to keep. Looks like the bearings don't come new. I can see where this one was mashed in there. I don't know if that was a leak or not, but it definitely has some deformed area right there. That's probably up here. Let's see, do these push out easy or do I have to use some sort of a puller? I'd be willing to bet if I heated it up, I probably would get this out of here pretty easy. So the way these are made, it's just a metal cup, and the bearing just sits inside that thing. Like I said, I think if I heat it up, this would probably come off pretty easy, because this would warm up faster than the bearing would. I just want to see if I can get it out of here without it. Nope, I think I might have to heat it up. All right. Definitely not what I wanted to do on a day like today where it's hot as can be outside. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing in position before I start heating it up. That way I don't have to mess with it. Now it looks like if I trim out the seal at the very center of this thing, I might be able to put a socket in there and have something to hit against. But I can tell you it's going to be very close. I'm going to have the exact socket. See, there's the spring for the seal. Looks like this 10mm socket fits down in there. Alright, so I found a 32mm 12-point socket. I'm going to try that. I do have a blind bearing puller. I just want to see if I can get it done this way. It's just barely moving. There we go, it's starting to move now. Yeah, it's coming out. And what I was concerned about was that the bearing was going to get stuck inside there, so. I hate pounding on bearings like that, but right now I don't have a choice. So this bearing is a 6201. I'm going to see if I have two 6201 bearings. Throw in this thing. Because this doesn't feel that smooth. So y'all hold tight. Let me look through my stash and see what I have. Okay, I found a couple of 6201 bearings. My problem is that both of them are sealed. I know on these plastic ones that I can pop the seal out. Just like that. I'm going to have to get that grease out of there. I don't know if these metal ones can pop out like that. Yeah, it looks like it will. Definitely not the right tool for the job. Just gently working my way around. There we go. You know, I'm not being very hard on these things. If I was really prying on this, that blade would snap, right? So I'm just giving myself a little bit of an opening so that I can get a screwdriver in there. Let me get the grease cleaned up out of these things, and I'll bring you guys right back. Take Take the bad bearing. I'm going to go squeeze this in with the vise, put a socket on the back side of this, and so I can mash this in evenly because I don't like how it's going in there crooked. All right, I used a 22 millimeter socket, and I was able to back up the back of here and gently push it in with the vise. Recommendations, I would probably have put some lube in there first and probably warmed this up first. And then dropped them in, or possibly even frozen the bearings, then dropped them in. It probably would have been a lot easier. Nevertheless, got it done. This one here, I kind of destroyed taking it out. Let me see what kind of puller I have to get this oil pump drive gear off of here. All right, let's see. You don't have one of these bearing pullers. A lot of them can be just rented from auto parts stores. All right, got our oil pump drive gear off. A little harder than I thought it was going to be. And we need to pull off this bearing. Oof. Got a lot of dirt and stuff inside it. So these two go on. Let's get a little bit of two-stroke. Don't force it, because basically there's a lip right here, and if you force it, it'll turn that seal out, and then you won't be able to get it back in. So you want to be very gentle. If it doesn't go on gentle, you want to wrap it with a piece of plastic and then slide it on. And I think that's what we're actually going to do here. Part of an old water bottle. Preferably flatter than what I just cut. Yeah, we might be able to make that work. All right, just going to take that piece of plastic and wrap it around. Make a cone out of it. Man, that thing is really tight. Let's move it up there so we can get to it. There we go. There we go. Hopefully y'all saw that. One fell swoop, pops right on. And then we had this little lip right here. This oil drive gear stops right there at that lip. We're just going to take a deep well socket and tap that in place. All right, there we go. Oil pump drive gear, seated all the way down, went just past that ring and bottomed out on the crankshaft right there. Got the new seal in, new seals and new bearings in. They have good resistance, so I know that they're sealed up on there. Let's get this old piston and ring off of here. Grab that keeper, pull it out. Push your wrist pin out. This wrist pin bearing doesn't actually fit this. So I'm hoping that the wrist pin it does fit that. It also fits that. So I guess that there was a model that they had a wrist pin bearing. This one, however, doesn't come out. So this one's not getting one. Looking at the motor, the flywheel, so the spark plug faces backwards, right? Spark plug's on this side. The flywheel has the tapered shaft, so the flywheel would be on this side right here. The exhaust muffler is here, intake is here. So the tapered shaft is going to be on this outside edge here, and then the sprag clutch, or excuse me, the drum and everything is going to be on the oiler side, which should be on this side. So that means that the exhaust side is on this tapered side. The exhaust side is going to be on this side over here, right? Which means that the arrow is going to face to this side over here. That arrow there faces towards the exhaust. Let's lube up the wrist pin. Just set that in place real quick. We're going to drop the brand new keepers in. It does matter which way the arrow faces because there's a locator pin on the piston itself, and that locator pin on this one happens to be on the intake side, which means that on the inside of the cylinder, that the gap, that locator pin for the gap of the ring won't land in any of the holes. So that's why it's important to make sure that the arrow is facing the right direction. Let's get these two installed. See, I don't need that bearing. Unless it happens to be a clutch bearing, I really doubt it. I think it's probably just a different design. I got one on this side. One on this side, and then the gap of these two keepers, I'm going to have that gap facing straight up and down. Just rotate this until they're straight up and down. Spinning it in a circle. They're both straight up and down. Put our brand new ring on. Make sure it's lubricated. Make sure that the piston is lubricated. The ring has a groove. As you're looking at the end of the ring, they face like that way and that way. That is going to line up with that locator pin. If the locator pin is on the top side of that piston like this one is, that means that the longest side of the rings would be at the bottom and the shortest would be at the top because there's a pin that's going to fall into that little circular groove. And let's keep all that clean. Lube up our cylinder. Again, you just went through all that trouble making sure that the piston was on the right direction. Make sure that you put this back in the right direction. So again, we're looking at intakes on this side, exhaust is on this side, spark plug faces out, meaning that the tapered shaft is facing towards me. So I'm going to line up that ring in that groove. I don't need a ring compressor on this one because the cylinder itself is tapered. I wouldn't be able to use a ring compressor, let's put it that way. Just wiggle it back and forth until it goes in. It just occurred to me they didn't give me a new bottom to this thing. So I need to clean up this bottom. Let's dry fit this real quick. Yeah, it looks like it matches up pretty well. Okay, let's pull this off to the side because I'm going to put some 1184 gasket sealer on this. Ideally, this area here is sealed with those rubber seals, and I shouldn't need to seal those, but I am going to put a thin coat on there as well. Let's just get some on here and I'll smear it around. Let's get these two channels here. And I hope y'all saw that. In case you didn't, I put some 1184 gasket on the bottom cap. I put the crank in, made sure it was facing the right direction. Put the cap back on. Put some blue Loctite on these bolts. I thought they were Allens. They're actually not. They're T25s. They just had a lot of dirt on them. By the way, I'm going to tighten these up in a crisscross pattern. A couple of tips you could have done differently. You could have heated up this oil gear and probably installed it a little bit easier. You could have used that same bearing puller setup that I used. You could have flipped it around and used it to install that gear, you know, pushing from the other side. I probably wouldn't use a lubricant to put that on, just because it's a friction fit. So basically, it's basically just the friction of that against here that's actually driving that oil pump. The oil pump doesn't have a whole lot of pressure, so it shouldn't take much to make it spin, but it just seems counterproductive to put a lubricant on there. Definitely do not drill or file or scrape or anything like that because, like I said, it's a friction fit. Just get these tight. That is going to drop in just reverse of how we took it apart. So set the motor in like that. You can put Loctite on these if you like. So the oil pump goes next. Cleaned it up. The way this works, that oil pump drive gear spins this. This right here has a flat spot on the inside of that shaft. What it's doing is it's pulling oil out of that cavity right there, and it's pushing it up this channel into this groove here. That groove there feeds up to where the bar is at, underneath this plate, feeds up into this area here, and that's what feeds oil into your bar. That goes on there. Make sure this is clean. That goes on here. I'm going to put the 2 screws in. Do not over tighten these screws. Just get them snug. I can see this one here's already got a split on the plastic. This right here, if you pried it off like I did, just take a little tap and flatten that part back down again. Just that little tab that sticks up. You just want it to have to fight to get back on here. Okay. All right. The washer went next. And there is a bearing under here. Again, that doesn't appear to be removable. Let's see if it matches this one. Definitely a different quantity of bearings, and it's very tight if it is supposed to fit. So I'm not going to take it apart. What we are going to do is add a little bit of grease to this. Okay. And the washer went next, I believe. Then the clutch. And it tightens up the wrong way. All right. All right, what I'm going to do is use a adjustable spanner. You don't have to use something like this. I just happen to have one handy, and I'm just going to use this. It has 2 pins on here. What you can do is just take a piece of flat bar, maybe an old file. That'd be tough because you got to drill through it. But anyway, just like a flat bar or something like that, and measure the distance here and put 2 bolts through that flat bar with a nut on each side, something like that, just to hold them in place. And you can run those 2 bolts down inside this space right here, and you can use that as an adjustable wrench. I'm literally just going to use this because I have it and because it fits. This is used for the tractor, taking apart hydraulic cylinders. It just happens to fit. All right. Make sure everything still runs smoothly. I've worked on a few Husky saws, and I happen to have one of these. Matter of fact, I got this from the guy that I got the saw from. Anyhow, if you're using your old impulse grommet, make sure that it's sealed up. Potentially clean it, and maybe we can put some 1184 around it, something like that. It needs to be clear so that the air can pass through it, but make sure that it's clean and sealed, because that would be an intake leak. New intake gasket. This seal seals up on here, and then that green tube seals up on that tube right there. So we're going to make sure that this seats in there evenly and correctly. All right. Check it over good. Make sure it's completely sealed up. All right, there's a single bolt runs through there, and the gasket, and that plate, and then those bolt in right here. And before it gets snugged up all the way, let's make sure we align everything. And, yep, all that's in alignment now. And snug that up. Whoops, getting ahead of myself. This wiring was supposed to go in there first. Let's see, can I tuck that behind? Push it right back in there. Okay. That goes like there. And then now those can go in. Let's get the flywheel put back on. Washer and nut. This one tightens up righty tighty. Ignition coil to put back on. Let me pull this out the way so you guys can see for now. We have a ground wire that's going to go on here. And a kill wire, which is going to go on here. So let's leave that kill wire out of the way for now. Got my business card, or piece of business card. And up into there so that the magnet is touching both at the same time. And then snug these down. Do not crank these too tight. They're small and will break. If you're worried about them coming loose, put a little bit of blue Loctite on them. But don't over tighten them. You'll either strip out the magnesium case that's in there, or you'll break the bolt. Both of them are bad to do. Goes on there. This is going to go up here. That can go into there and into this hole right here. Make sure everything clears. We're going to find out. If I have to take it back off, I'll take it back off. But this will help hold everything in place. And by everything, I mean this blue snorkel. Air injection snorkel. Alright, so that one. Alright, these two are going to go into the gas tank whenever it gets mounted, it feels like. Alright, those two go in the gas tank. Get a new fuel line for this gas tank. Alright, we need that fuel line to be that long. Let me dig out some fuel line. Alright, I found some fuel line. Appears to be correct. What I like to do to be able to fish it through here, sometimes I have to use fishing wire, but I always try to just cut it at a really steep angle and see if I can just push it through far enough to grab it. Grab a pair of hemostats, grab the line and just start pulling it down. Carburetor side was, whoops, we pulled too much. Carburetor side was right at that length, right there. Let's pull the end of it out, pinch it off. Blow and suck into it. Make sure that you don't have any leaks that you pinched in it. I'm going to look around for a new filter. This line has to go up through that hole. Don't forget. Otherwise you'll be taking it apart again. Or you have to fish it through, one or the other. There we go. One goes here. One goes here. Yes, we can get the handle on while we're here. Two long ones should be on that side. Two short ones down here. Whoops. Looking at a brand new carburetor. I don't want to lose sight of this ground wire. It's going to attach to that plate. But let's get the carburetor fuel line on. The one gasket, well, this is a exhaust gasket came with. This is a gasket that has the impulse hole on it. See that little hole right there? The little hole lines up with the impulse port. It doesn't really matter which way you put this on. It seems like it's the same both ways. It's going to come out of this hole right here. It's going to travel up this channel and into that space there. That gasket allows for it to come out at the top right there through that hole, and then that's going to line up with that hole right there. And that's what drives your metering diaphragm. So the fuel line wraps around the top of the carburetor. We have a metal plate, these two screws, and then you got to line up that gasket that we just finished putting on there. Looks like the fuel line's supposed to come around this back side here, potentially through there. Okay, before I get too far, I want to make sure that that metal bracket lines up. Looks like it does. Two little screws go into that metal plate right there. One of them goes through the wire and then through the metal plate. That's your ground to be able to shut off the ignition. It grounds out the coil. Use a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver, not the number 1. Dust cover for my adjusting screws. Choke lever just stabs into here. Just stabs right into there, and then put this piece of plastic down in that groove, and then make sure that it works like it's supposed to. Throttle linkage should go up into this hole and into that groove like that. And then if that works, that should work. I was just pressing down on it to make sure it didn't pop out. So choke, throttle, okay. All right, got a bar and chain on it. fill it up with fuel, see if we can make it run. See, I think we're ready to start it up. Looks like flathead screws for the adjusters. The low is on the pull handle side, the high is on the throttle side, and then the idle speed is up here at the top. I'll adjust it as is, but most likely after about a tank of gas, I'll have to adjust it again because after the ring wears in, it changes it just a little bit. But the idea is I want to adjust the idle speed so that it's just barely turning. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn the idle speed up. I'm going to adjust the low until maximum throttle, and it's usually about a turn out from being bottomed out. Once I'm there, I'm going to adjust back and forth just a little bit till I get the maximum throttle, and then I'll just go just a little bit to the rich side, like maybe 10 degrees or so to the rich side, which would be counterclockwise, open. And then on the high, I'm going to hold the throttle wide open, and I'm going to be listening for a burble sound. So I'm going to bring the idle speed way up to maximum, and then I'm going to go a little bit more to the rich side, which again is counterclockwise. And I'm going to get that until I start hearing a four-stroking. It's kind of it's maximum, and then it comes back a little bit to a blah, just a little bit on the rich side. Again, just maybe 10 degrees towards the rich side. The idea is when you're in the cut, it sounds perfectly clean. It's a smooth two cycle engine sound, just a really smooth sound. When I let up pressure, I'll start hearing a burble is basically the best way I can describe it. They call it a four-stroking. So, and then once I've got those adjusted, I'm going to adjust my idle speed back down till the chain is either not moving or just barely moving. So let's see if we can get this thing to run. She's running way too fast for me. I couldn't get the idle to come down. Shows that's a sign of a intake leak, but let's just see. Might be adjustments. let me explain what I was doing. Couldn't hear me when I was adjusting. So I took the idle speed screw, once I got it running, right? You have to get it running. I took my idle speed screw and I turned it up until just a little higher than what you would normally be hearing. Once it's high enough that you can hear it just a little bit more than it would normally be, I went to the L screw, which is the one closest to the engine, and I started adjusting it. You want it to start off at about 1 turn out from bottom. Bottom meaning screw it in until it just touches. Don't crank it down, it'll break. Turn it into it just touches. Count your screwdriver handles out 1 full turn. Once it's out 1 full turn, and the high speed is also the exact same, about 1 full turn. And it varies between 3/4 and 1.5, something like that. But 1 full turn is a good starting point. So I go to the L screw and I start moving it in just a little bit and out just a little bit, listening for the maximum RPMs. And you'll notice as you're doing that, it'll be a little bit slow to respond until you start getting it really close to the correct mixture. Get it a little bit, see if it starts sounding highest RPMs. If the clutch isn't worn out like this one, the chain will actually start moving as it's starting to speed up, and you can actually visually see it get to its maximum RPM. Once I'm at maximum RPM, I usually just go just a little bit counterclockwise, open it up just a little bit richer. And the only reason I do that is so that I can get a faster throttle response. So if you start off with maximum RPM, that would be fine. Once I'm there, I start taking my idle speed screw and I turn it down to where it's a lot closer to idle speed, maybe a little bit on the fast side. Then the H screw. H screw is what determines your maximum RPMs. The idea is you can put a tachometer on here, look up the spec for the motor, and decide, if it's at 12,000 RPMs, you can actually set it for, 11,900, 12,000, something like that. You're adjusting your H screw for that maximum speed that it wants, because it can actually run faster than what it's supposed to do. So the H screw is what determines that. Mine was starving for fuel, that ba-dub-ba-dub-ba-dub-ba-dub-ba-dub, which sounded almost like a spark plug giving up, or a rev limiter giving up. Mine was actually just starving for fuel. So I turned this H screw counterclockwise, started giving it a little bit more fuel until it smoothed out. Once I had my RPM set, that will then affect my L screw just a little bit more. So I go back to the L screw and start adjusting my idle, again, for maximum RPM at idle. And then like I said, I just go just a little bit counterclockwise to get a little bit faster throttle response. And I like the saws running a little bit on the rich side. I don't mind changing out spark plugs because they got fouled up from being too rich. A rich saw is going to run cooler and it's going to have a faster throttle response. That's a personal preference. So I set mine that way. Once I think I've got my L screw set, I go back to my H screw and again check for maximum throttle, or excuse me, maximum RPMs. And then I go back to my L screw and I bounce back and forth a few times. The idea is you want to do this after it's warmed up, and then once you think you have it, shut it off and immediately check and make sure. Once it's warm, this thing should fire up on the very first, maybe second pull. That'll tell you that you're really close to the proper mixture. When it's a new engine like this, I'm going to probably end up going through a tank full of fuel. The rings will start seating in, and once the rings seat in, these mixture screws will change just a little bit. Maybe 1/8 of a turn, something like that, not a lot. If you cannot adjust this, basically it's just running way too fast and you cannot get the adjustments to come in, you've got an intake leak or an air leak somewhere. You've got the carburetor's not sealing against the motor properly, your crank seals are leaking, base gasket, leak where the cylinder sealed up to the bottom, or if you had a cylinder that attached to the top, if like a 2-part on the top side, because this is a 2-part at the bottom side at the crank. Some of them seal above the crank and you've got a gasket leak there. And you can check that with some sort of a spray lubricant. I like using something that's flammable, even propane. You can use a propane bottle without a flame on it and just add fuel to it, and you'll actually hear the motor rev up or stall out depending upon how much you've given it. So anyway, that's how I set up these saws, and they're all the same as far as this just happens to be a smaller one. Hope you guys got something out of the video. Hope you learned something. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and watch more of my other videos. And I hope to catch you guys on the next one.